I grew up knowing, without anyone ever saying it out loud, that I mattered less. It wasn't something written down or discussed openly, but it lived in the pauses, in the sighs, in the way conversations shifted when my sister walked into a room. Victoria was always the light everyone turned toward. I was the background noise people forgot was even there. From the time we were children, the contrast was obvious. Victoria was praised for everything. If she brought home a good grade, it was framed and shown to relatives. If I did the same, it was acknowledged with a distracted nod, followed immediately by a comparison. Victoria won a small beauty pageant when she was 12, and my parents told that story for years as if it were proof that she was destined for greatness. When I won a regional science competition in high school, my father said it was nice, but asked if it would actually lead anywhere useful. Victoria learned early that she was adored. She walked with confidence, spoke loudly, expected to be listened to. I learned the opposite. I learned to shrink, to speak carefully, to choose my words like they were fragile things that could be used against me. At family gatherings, I watched how people leaned in when Victoria spoke and leaned away when I did. I noticed how my parents' faces softened when she laughed and tightened when I disagreed. She went into marketing, joined a prestigious sorority, surrounded herself with people who talked about influence and image and success as if those things were currencies you could collect. I chose agricultural science, sustainability, soil health, food systems, things that mattered deeply to me but sounded unimpressive to people who equated value with titles and glass offices. Every achievement I made was quietly reduced. I published research. Victoria got promoted. I was invited to speak at a conference. Victoria bought a new car. My parents never said they were ashamed of me, but they didn't have to. Disappointment has its own language. When I graduated college, they arrived late, sat through the ceremony distracted, and left early because Victoria had a work event she wanted them to attend. I remember standing there in my graduation gown, watching other families hug their children, feeling something hollow settle in my chest. That was the moment I understood that nothing I achieved would ever be enough if it didn't look the way they expected success to look. 3 years ago, I met Daniel at an agricultural sustainability conference. He was speaking about regenerative farming practices, about long-term soil investment, about feeding communities instead of markets. He spoke calmly, thoughtfully, without ego. I remember listening to him and feeling seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. We talked after his presentation. What started as a discussion about crop rotation turned into hours of conversation. He was intelligent without being arrogant, passionate without being loud. He didn't talk about money or status. He talked about responsibility. When we started dating, it felt easy, safe. He listened when I spoke. He didn't interrupt. He didn't compare. He never made me feel like I had to prove my worth. A year later, he took me to his family farm. It was large, well-run, efficient, but nothing about it was flashy. Daniel lived simply, dressed simply, spoke simply. He never bragged. He never needed to. I fell in love with his values long before I fell in love with him. When I brought him home to meet my family, I already knew how it would go. My mother's smile froze when she heard the word farmer. My father asked questions that weren't really questions at all, just thinly disguised judgments. Victoria smiled politely and made comments that sounded supportive but carried a sharp edge underneath. A farmer, really, Emily? What happened to ambition? Are you going to live out in the middle of nowhere now? Daniel answered kindly, calmly. He didn't correct them. He didn't defend himself. He simply was who he was. Later that night, he asked me if I was okay. I told him I was used to it. He didn't like that answer. Victoria got engaged soon after, to Derek. He was everything my parents admired. Corporate executive, expensive suits, loud confidence, constantly talking about promotions, bonuses, connections. My parents adored him instantly. Finally, someone with real prospects in the family, my mother said, without realizing what that sentence implied. Daniel and I married quietly. A small ceremony, a handful of people who genuinely loved us. My parents attended but complained about the simplicity, about the lack of spectacle. Victoria's engagement, meanwhile, became a production. Hundreds of guests, luxury venue, endless planning, endless praise. What my family didn't know was that Daniel owned Watson Agricultural Holdings. They didn't know about the farmland across 3 states, the supply contracts, the valuation that quietly passed 50 million. They didn't know because we didn't tell them. Daniel said something then that stayed with me. If they can't respect you without knowing this, they don't deserve to know it. So we stayed silent, and I kept enduring. Family gatherings became exercises of patience, jokes about shoveling manure, comments about real careers, smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Daniel never reacted. He never corrected anyone. He just squeezed my hand and reminded me the truth didn't need an audience. Victoria's wedding was announced as the event of the year. The budget alone made my stomach tighten. I received an invitation that placed me at the extended family table, far from the center. At the bridal shower, I wasn't asked to help plan. My mother said they didn't think I'd understand the level of sophistication they were aiming for. 2 weeks before the wedding, there was a problem with the venue payment, a gap that threatened everything. An anonymous donation covered part of it. No one knew it was me. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because, despite everything, she was still my sister. On the day of the wedding, Daniel and I arrived quietly, dressed nicely but not extravagantly. Victoria pulled me aside almost immediately. There was an issue with seating, she said. A very important guest was arriving. We needed to wait outside for now. Outside meant plastic chairs near the service entrance. I sat down and stared at the ground, telling myself not to cry. Daniel's jaw tightened. He asked if this was really happening. I told him it didn't matter. It was her day. I didn't want a scene. That was when Derek came out. He looked at me like I was something misplaced, asked what I was doing there. When I explained, he laughed softly and told me not to come inside until someone told me to. Important guests, he said. Then he kept talking. About aesthetics, about fitting in, about how generous Victoria was for inviting me at all. He called me dirt. I felt something crack. Then Victoria came out, saw my tears, and accused me of making a scene. Before I could finish a sentence, she took a glass of red wine and poured it down my dress. My parents saw everything. They didn't defend me. They left. And then someone said Daniel's name, and everything began to change. And for a moment, the world seemed to pause. The voice that spoke Daniel's name wasn't loud, but it carried authority. The venue manager had stopped mid-step, his expression shifting from professional politeness to sudden alarm. He hurried toward us, eyes fixed on Daniel, not on me sitting in a wine-soaked dress on a plastic chair. "Mr. Watson? I had no idea you'd be attending today," he said, extending his hand quickly. "If we'd known this was a family event for you, we would have arranged things very differently." Derek froze. Victoria's face lost its color so fast it was almost frightening. My parents, who had been halfway to the parking lot, stopped and turned around, confusion written all over them. Daniel stood slowly, calm, controlled, the same way he always was. He didn't shake the manager's hand right away. Instead, he gestured toward me. "I'm here to support my wife," he said evenly, "the one you've just left sitting outside." The venue manager followed his gaze and visibly flinched. Apologies began spilling out immediately, but Daniel raised a hand to stop him. Derek finally found his voice. "Wait," he said, forcing a laugh that sounded wrong even to his own ears. "What's going on here?" The manager looked at him, puzzled. "You don't know?" he asked. "This is Mr. Daniel Watson, Watson Agricultural Holdings." There was a silence so heavy it felt physical. Derek's eyes widened, then darted between Daniel and me as if trying to recalculate reality in real time. "Watson, as in," he swallowed hard, "as in the parent company?" Daniel nodded once. "That's right." Victoria grabbed Derek's arm. "What does that mean?" she whispered sharply. Derek didn't answer her. His attention was locked on Daniel now, panic arising. You own the company?" he said quietly. "You're my boss's boss?" My mother laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous," she said. "He's a farmer." Daniel looked at her calmly. "I am a farmer. I also own 12,000 acres across 3 states and supply over $30 million worth of produce annually, including to the company your daughter just married into." My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. "You never said anything," he muttered. I stood up. My dress was stained, sticky, ruined. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. "You never asked," I said. "You just assumed." Derek took a step closer to Daniel, desperation creeping into his posture. "Sir," he said quickly, "we were supposed to meet next week about my promotion. I've been really looking forward to—" Daniel cut him off without raising his voice. "That meeting is canceled." Derek blinked. "What?" "So is your promotion." The color drained from Derek's face. "Sir, please, I didn't mean—" "You called my wife dirt. You humiliated her. You treated her like she was beneath you." Victoria rushed forward. "We didn't know who you were," she said defensively. Daniel turned to her slowly. "Exactly," he replied, "and this is how you treat people when you think they don't matter." Derek's breathing had become shallow. "Please," he said again, "I'm sorry, I really am." Daniel studied him for a moment, then spoke again. "That promotion came with an $80,000 raise and stock options. You've already spent that money, haven't you?" Derek didn't answer. "The car, the apartment, this wedding. You were living like the job was already yours." Victoria turned on Derek. "Is that true?" Still, he said nothing. Daniel glanced toward the venue manager. "There was an issue with the final payment, wasn't there?" The manager nodded nervously. "Yes, sir. $15,000 still outstanding." Victoria's head snapped toward my parents. "You said you paid that." My mother stammered. "We thought Derek's parents—" "They backed out," Derek whispered. Slowly, everyone turned to me. Victoria's voice was sharp now. "That anonymous donation, that was you, wasn't it?" I nodded. "I didn't want your wedding canceled." Her eyes lit up with something ugly. "Then you can cover the rest too. You have the money." My mother stepped forward. "Emily, please, family helps family." That was the moment something inside me finally broke. "Family," I said quietly, "doesn't make someone sit outside on the floor at their own sister's wedding." My father tried again. "We loved Daniel." "That shouldn't matter," I said. "You're my daughter." Daniel placed his hand gently on my shoulder. "You don't owe them anything." The crowd had grown now, guests whispering, phones out, recording, watching. I looked at all of them, my sister, my parents, Derek shaking, people who had spent years deciding my worth without ever knowing me. I paid the deposit out of kindness, but kindness isn't a blank check. Victoria's voice cracked. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm not paying the rest." My mother gasped. "You'd ruin your sister's wedding?" I met her eyes. "No, you did that when you decided I wasn't good enough to sit inside." Derek tried to speak to Daniel again, his voice barely holding together. "Please, about my job." Daniel shook his head. "HR will be contacting you Monday. This isn't just about today." Derek collapsed to his knees. Victoria screamed at me, words spilling out in a rush of blame and fury. I listened calmly, then shook my head. "I didn't ruin anything," I said. "I just stopped pretending." We turned and walked away. As we reached the car, my father called out, "Emily, we love you." I paused, then looked back one last time. "You love the version of me that succeeds, not the one who needed you." We drove away. In the rearview mirror, I watched chaos unfold, guests leaving, vendors packing up, my sister standing in disbelief, my parents begging for solutions that didn't exist. And for the first time in my life, I felt light. The silence in the car lingered longer than I expected. Daniel didn't rush to fill it. He never did. He just drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly over mine, like an anchor keeping me steady while everything I had known unraveled behind us. I thought I would cry. I thought the weight of it all would finally crush me, but instead, there was something else. Relief. Deep and unfamiliar, like I had been holding my breath for decades and only just realized I was allowed to exhale. That night, my phone didn't stop vibrating. Calls from my parents, messages from Victoria, unknown numbers. I didn't answer any of them. I watched the screen light up and go dark again over and over until eventually I turned it face down and went to bed for the first time in years without feeling guilty for choosing myself. The next morning, there were 47 missed calls. Texts filled my inbox, my mother begging, my father demanding explanations, Victoria oscillating between rage and desperation. Derek left a voicemail so frantic it was almost incoherent. He kept saying my name like it was a life raft. I listened to none of it. Instead, I opened social media. Videos from the wedding were everywhere. Someone had filmed the confrontation. Someone else had recorded Derek on his knees. Another clip showed my wine-soaked dress as I stood up and finally spoke. The comments were brutal, but not toward me. For once, the story wasn't being told by my family. People saw what I had lived with for years, the favoritism, the cruelty dressed up as jokes, the way silence had been used as a weapon. Strangers defended me with more conviction than my parents ever had. I felt sick and validated at the same time. I showed Daniel. "I feel guilty," I admitted. "Is that wrong?" He shook his head. "No, it means you're kind. That's what they relied on." Monday morning came quickly. Derek was fired. Not quietly, not gently. HR found expense fraud. Months of personal charges passed off as business costs. The promotion he had been counting on vanished, and with it the illusion he had built his entire identity around. Without the job, the debt crushed him. The car was repossessed, the apartment lease broken. He moved back in with his parents, his carefully curated image collapsing almost overnight. Victoria broke off the engagement within days. "I can't marry someone with nothing," she told my mother through sobs that didn't sound like grief so much as panic. Losing Derek wasn't about love, it was about losing the version of herself she liked best. My mother called me, crying. "Your sister is ruined," she said. "She has nothing." I listened quietly, then replied, "She has exactly what she valued, her image." That conversation ended abruptly. Over the next few weeks, my life became something I barely recognized. Word spread, not just about the wedding, but about me, about Daniel, about the life we had built quietly, deliberately, without needing approval. People who had once ignored me now wanted meetings, networking calls, invitations. My professional achievements, which had existed long before the wedding, suddenly mattered to people who had never bothered to ask. Victoria emailed me once, just once. She asked if I could say publicly that the wedding incident had been a misunderstanding. Her reputation, she said, was suffering. I replied with one word: no. 6 months later, I stood on a stage at a national conference delivering a keynote on sustainable agriculture and long-term food systems. The room was full. The applause was real. Daniel sat in the front row, smiling like he always did, not because of where I was standing, but because of who I was. After the speech, a young woman approached me, eyes red, hands shaking. She told me her family didn't support her choices either, that she felt invisible, small, like she was constantly failing no matter how hard she tried. Asked how I kept going. I told her the truth. You don't need their approval to succeed. You need your own. Build a life so full that their opinions become background noise, and never shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold you. That speech went viral in its own quiet way. A week later, my mother emailed me. She said she was proud, that she had always known I would do great things. She asked if we could start over. I read the message slowly. Then I deleted it. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some distances are exactly the right size. Today, my life is peaceful, honest, free of the constant need to prove my worth to people who were committed to misunderstanding it. I still love deeply. I still give generously, but I no longer give myself away to those who treat love like a transaction. If you've ever been made to feel small by the people who were supposed to protect you, remember this. Your worth doesn't come from being chosen by them. It comes from choosing yourself. Build your own life, find your own people, and live so well that their voices fade into nothing more than distant noise.